There's a lie and kind of a misconception that we're told about photography as photographers. It goes a little something like this, and it's something that I've noticed predominantly with photographers that are beginning that middle stage of their journey in photography. And it's that most photographers kind of stall out after they do everything that they've been told they should do right. They finally understand exposure. The camera no longer feels confusing anymore. Images are sharp, they understand how colors behave, but the problem is that instead of feeling closer to the work that they feel like they should be making, they feel stalled out or even bored. Kind of like they reached an end of the road that they promised that they would make it to if they just understood all of the technical aspects of photography. Now, what makes this really confusing for a lot of photographers is that nothing seems wrong. Technically speaking, everything is working. Photographs still seem empty. What's important to know is that this isn't a personal failure on the artist. It's a lie that's working exactly how it was designed to work. And that's because modern photography education is built on a very professional assumption. And it's kind of the assumption why I started this whole channel in the first place. It says that if you master your settings, if you learn your gear, if you optimize your workflow, that you'll become a better photographer. They talk about it like that builds a clean story, that it becomes sort of measurable or tangible. This assumption fits perfectly into things like lesson plans or the countless gear reviews that you see on YouTube or online. It fits perfectly into those types of YouTube videos that you see with a red arrow pointing on the thumbnail to a histogram. But it's also incomplete. And that's because technical competence doesn't make you the best photographer. It only gains you access to the room for the real work to begin. And that real work has almost nothing to do with the camera whatsoever. All right, glad that we got through that introduction. My name is Jared Thomas Tapie. I'm a social documentary photographer and educator here in New York City, and you're watching the YouTube channel. Across my social media platforms, I've created 5 segments: crafting a photograph, life through the lens, marks of the maker, the creative connection, and tools of the trade. Throughout each segment, we talk about very specific things within the art of photography. This segment is going to be a crafting a photograph episode. Crafting a photograph is all about taking you from just taking pictures to crafting a photograph with your own unique vision and voice. And today, we're discussing the lie that we're told about progressing as a photographer. Now, every photographer eventually gets to the same point. Your photographs look pretty good. Exposure is correct, focus is accurate, you're understanding composition a little bit better, but you can't help but feel like something's missing. Now, most people feel as if when this happens and they hit this wall, they think that they need to have a better understanding of the technical aspects of photography, some sort of refinement. So what do? You buy a new lens, you buy a new camera body, something with more dynamic range, a more cinematic look. But that assumption is incredibly simple. But here's the reality. Yes, technical skill absolutely matters. But in the big 2026, technical competence isn't rare anymore. Modern cameras meter light better than most people understand it. Autofocus predicts movement incredibly well. And now you have software that fixes mistakes instantly. Perfect exposure has never been easier to achieve. The problem is that people don't realize that it's never mattered less. Once your work is technically competent, improvement stops coming from polish. It starts coming from risk. Risk means staying on the scene longer than you would typically stay on the scene. Risk means working in light that doesn't flatter your instincts. Technical mastery really only keeps you from falling through the floor. It doesn't elevate you anywhere. Another big problem with photography's education is isolation. Now, this is coming from personal experience. A lot of photography education teaches you to stay within the medium. And I'm a big advocate for studying the history of photography and studying photographers. But a lot of the coursework is only that. Study photographers, analyze photographs, learn camera systems, and learn editing workflows. Meaning that everything happens within the same closed loop. The funny thing is that if you do study photographers, very well-known photographers, famous photographers, none of them did that. No serious photographer would ever create within a closed loop. Because believe it or not, photography isn't about cameras. It's about the world. The fastest way to stagnate yourself as a photographer is to only study photography. You end up becoming fluent in a language that only speaks to itself. Real growth happens when you expand your reference points. For example, painting teaches you color emotionally instead of technically. Literature teaches pacing and narrative tension. Cinema teaches you sequencing. Music teaches you rhythm. Philosophy teaches you how to sit with the more difficult questions. And psychology teaches you about the way that humans behave. All of these disciplines shape how you see the world. And once your references expand beyond photography, your work all of a sudden has somewhere new to explore. Now, another lie that photographers believe is that improvement should feel linear. We sort of imagine progress as a steady incline, each shoot better than the last, each image stronger than the last one. But photography doesn't work like that. No art form works like that. Improvement in any art form looks like repetition, and in many ways it looks inefficient. It looks like walking the same streets over and over. It looks like making the same mistakes again and again, but each time you learn something new. You photograph the same subjects repeatedly because something about them still resists your understanding. And this repetition builds a sort of familiarity. You become more familiar with your instincts, with your blind spots. And the big one is that you become more familiar with the difference between genuine boredom and impatience. I've noticed that boredom is actually why a lot of photographers kind of quit. Because boredom is when that point of novelty, oh my God, this is so great. Being a documentary photographer, a street photographer is so amazing. I'm out here with the people. Without realizing that 90% of the time it's you just walking around pretty much aimlessly. They begin to notice that their usual tricks just aren't working anymore. But serious photographers understand that boredom is actually where the real work begins. Now, another thing to consider is that experimentation should play a huge role in your development as an artist and as a photographer. And I think that the act of experimentation is kind of had a misunderstanding as well. When I talk about misunderstanding, I'm not talking about trying out film stocks that completely flip the color grade. I'm not talking about using film stocks that turn everything turquoise or turn everything red. There's a time and a place for that if you're into that sort of thing. But, many serious photographers are not. To me, experimentation is not wild editing styles or any of the film stocks that I mentioned before. Really, that sort of just kind of feels more so like a wardrobe change, kind of. Real experimentation is much quieter. Experimentation, in the sense that I'm talking about it, is interrupting your habits. It's about things like standing somewhere different or going down a different street, letting your compositions feel a little bit awkward. Experimentation is like photographing subjects that you would usually avoid and working slower when you usually rush, or working faster when you're usually a little bit more hesitant. The goal isn't to discover a completely new style. The goal should be kind of discovering the edges of what you already do and diving deeper into that. Because comfort is efficient, but it also keeps your work inside of a narrow range of outcomes. The act of experimentation just expands that range. Now, here's another truth that a lot of serious photographers end up realizing, whether they went to school or not. And it's that much of photography education isn't geared towards making you a photography artist. It's designed to create professionals, which means that it focuses on reliability. And I think that that's why a lot of the sort of online education that we see doesn't really differ that far off from what you learn in university. Education in the world of photography really focuses on clean images and clear communication, these sort of repeatable results. And, those skills do matter, absolutely. But they also prioritize efficiency over curiosity. The danger isn't learning commercial skills. The danger is letting those skills be the only ones that you value. And that's because eventually approval starts to feel like growth. And that sort of efficiency that you're so used to starts to feel like depth. And then that's why somewhere along the way, the work stops feeling alive. So how can you actually improve? Real improvement happens when you stop optimizing workflows and start actually paying attention to your life. You improve by walking towards discomfort instead of just sort of explaining it away. By noticing what you avoid photographing, and by staying in situations longer than feels productive at times. You'll notice that you begin to improve at photography when you let photography sort of exist alongside your life instead of becoming the main thing that it's about. It's my personal belief that the camera records the consequences of your attention. If your life is narrow, your photographs will be narrow. But when your experiences expand, your work expands with them. Photography, in a serious sense, is not about mastering a device. It's about learning how to see. The lie is that improvement can be optimized, that with the right course, system, or camera, that improvement will arrive cleanly and predictably. But like with many other things, improvement isn't something that you can engineer. It's more so something that you endure. It comes from repeated exposure to the world, to other art, to your own limitations. And eventually, the camera stops being a shield and it becomes a mirror. Once that happens, the work finally begins to deepen. Not because your settings improved, but because you did. Alrighty guys, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed this lesson. I hope that you learned something and hopefully provided you with a different perspective on your journey as an artist. You can find me on Instagram at Jared Tapey, on TikTok at Jared Thomas Tapey _ on Substack at The Creative Connection, and then here on YouTube. Thanks for joining me for this fun little video and in this episode of Crafting a Photograph, and I hope to see you on the next one. Alright. Get out there and get shooting.